specifically when buildings are warm enough where they can go in and get their washing done. Because that's one complaint my trucker always has is the building's cold, it takes forever to wash, the truck is cold, and everything starts icing up. It takes forever to get that truck washed.
Right. No, that is a huge concern. And one of the things that we have done is we had convened groups of packers early on, both that had truck wash facilities that don't. As far as the easier answer, is there a mandatory effort? No. But they have been heavily involved in this discussion and continue to be as far as biosecurity and truck wash facilities and the need to get these vehicles clean. Have we got everything implemented? I'd love to say we do, but we don't. It's an ongoing effort. And really, it's truly, I think, a mindset change because this has changed the game for a lot of us. So we are working with that sector to provide this information and knowledge, and there are a lot of people that are actively involved, but change sometimes is slow, but it is top of the list to try to get that adjusted. And not just for PED, but for PRRS as well.
The trucker says that the nearest wash facility is Storm Lake that Tyson. Is about 15 miles down the road.
Yeah. No, and I agree. It is difficult.
My car down there.
Yeah.
Just an observation that Paul Yeske reported when he was working on this. A lot of the packing plants just are not set up to allow for good biosecurity. And a lot of times, just the way the thing is set up, the trucker has to be in and out of his cab up to 5 times, and then in and out of the trailer. And just to do the paperwork requires that the person driving the truck has to do that. And we haven't had a chance to really assess that, but I think this whole outbreak that we've had of PED has prompted that conversation, and I think that they're taking it seriously to try to remodel their systems for managing that.
Thank you for that question. Another question from the audience?
Did I hear right? Did you say that it lives in dry feed 3 days only? Did I understand that?
Yeah, Dr. Goyle's work did show, he went through and looked at dry feeds, and I'd have to go back and refer the work that he did. But if I recall correctly, they did find a PCR positive. They went back and did bioassay and did find it survivable up to 3 days. But like I said, I'll need to go back and check that right off of his reports. But that was shorter than slurried feed. Slurried feed was a little bit longer. I think, if I recall, that was 7 days. But it had a little bit of survivable time. Now, granted, that was in a spiked feed in a laboratory situation. So obviously, in outside commercial conditions may be different. But at least for what he did for his trial, that's what we identified, or he identified.
Thank you for that question. Another question right in front.
If it's been in China and Europe for years, why don't we know more about it?
Everybody hearing that question? Okay, I'll repeat the question if that's okay. Basically, if I could repeat it, the virus starts in England and Europe, then it goes to Asia, and now it's in the U.S. and North America. What are the differences between those 3 continents, and why do we seem to be having worse trouble than they had in Europe?
Sure. Exactly what I said.
Well, there's, a lot of it is really the focus on it. In Asia right now, it's relatively considered an endemic disease. So sometimes the funds, the organized research capability isn't quite available overseas that it is here, at least from the Asian standpoint. However, there are more universities and researchers that are looking at that, and we've talked to several different people that are doing more studies. But when they got it, a lot of those folks just accepted they have it and moved on. Now, I do know in Europe, the strains that they have, we have not been able to confirm it, but they are looking at the genetic sequence of the virus, because what they're seeing in Europe does have a difference clinically from what is being seen in Asia. So there's a lot of discussion ongoing right now to try to really ferret that out, but A lot of times, though, even within the United States, the conditions that pigs are raised in the biosecurity that's in Asia, and folks that have been there can answer this better than I can, but are drastically different. So we wanted to be able to make sure we had the research information under U.S. production conditions to really be able to have some relevant information to give back to you all.
I want to emphasize this last point that Lisa was trying to make, and as well, like when PED entered the U.S. was completely a naive population, completely naive, right? So, and this is a virus that likes to replicate a lot and survive. You don't need a lot of virus to really cause the disease. So all of a sudden, we have all these susceptible animals as an industry that generate a lot of virus. And the other thing we have in this industry is that we move pigs around very much. So which again increases the risk of transport because of all the amount of vehicles we use, but the fact that we also place them in different states. So as an industry which has a lot of advantages to have that production model of the multi-site production, it's a disadvantage when it comes down to some diseases like this. So we are learning the big picture how to handle that. And other places like in Europe or China, again, the production systems might be different. But when they have them, they can also be very devastating diseases. So, and I think what we will see, unfortunately, we will learn a lot by suffering ourselves. But a lot of the research on transmission and what to do at the farm level, I think it will come from research here in the U.S. And with the help of all of you in your farms, we'll learn a lot.
Question right here.
After seeing it come to our area, one thing we noticed was the feed delivery people, they were pretty quick to get on board with understanding what the need was for biosecurity. But even within a couple of weeks after it had hit, some of the LP drivers weren't aware. Maintenance people, all those kind of people that come onto your farms, UPS truck drivers. Is there a way we could get some kind of a sheet? We've got all the information sheets, but one that's just more basic and tailored that we can just give to the people that are coming to our farms that show some basic biosecurity and why we need to do it and the importance of thinking about those things when you're working in a rural area. I think that would be helpful.
Can you hear that? That one you can hear. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
No comment? Sorry.
No, I agree. I mean, I think we do have a basic document of what it is, but as far as the basic having a one-pager on the biosecurity, that is something we could definitely do. I don't think it would take a whole lot. I know there's a lot of, I know Minnesota, you guys have a lot of stuff at SDEC, but yes, that's a really good thing, and even almost in a checklist form, I guess.
Just
okay.
Something for the people that don't have a clue.
Right.
And if they're going to be going from farm to farm in a rural area, it'd be really nice for them to
What should do.
what we're living with here.
Okay.
Thank you. Another question? Right over here.
Maybe it's more of a point that the packers are talking about not being up to speed on maybe getting facilities to wash these trailers. They seem pretty quick to send letters out to producers and tell them how to raise their pigs and how to, change their, production practices. And, we're kind of tired of it. But as soon as we ask them to do something, they're backing up their feet really quick. But they don't have a problem sending letters out to us and telling us how to raise our pigs, whether in crates or in pens or what other things we need to be doing. They seem to be able to bend over really quick when PETA calls them or somebody else tells them what to do. They throw us under the bus. Maybe it's time they start stepping up to the plate and start helping the producers out there are part of our food chain here instead of some people who don't really give a dang about us no matter what.
Thank you for your comments. Any response?
Yeah, to work on it. Point taken.
Point taken, I think, right. That's right, point taken. Any other comments or questions? Right in the middle here.
Maybe for the veterinary professionals or the researchers, is there or would there be value in having PRRS or PED as a reportable disease? What's people's thoughts on that?
I'll repeat the question. I think it's a great one. David alluded to it. Basically, it's what should change if, with 20/20 hindsight now, on the classifications of the viruses, this virus was classified as a transboundary virus as opposed to a reportable virus. And maybe all three of you should comment on, well, in 2020 hindsight, what should have we done?
Well, I'll start the response, just because this is, we've been involved as I have in the North 212 project, strictly voluntary. So it becomes somewhat cumbersome, because in order to get the information, first of all, once an outbreak happens, the producer has to be a participant, has to sign so that there's no confidentiality problems. Then the producer has to call me. I generally would call them back to make sure that they're comfortable disclosing to the rest of the area, and that can take some time. And when we look at this, it's a very sensitive issue to make a disease reportable. However, I talked to Beth Thompson, who is involved with our Board of Animal Health, and I was a little surprised to find that really, in order to make a disease reportable, you just have to persuade the board that this is a good idea. It doesn't require legislative action or anything like that. Now, if you're to restrict movement of pigs, that's a much bigger deal, because then you've got an enforcement issue that has to take place. So, when I look at it, I'm asking the question to myself, whether we're talking about PED or PRRS, would that be in the best interest of the pig? Would it be in the best interest of the pig producer? And would it be in the best industry of the pig industry? I think, again, if I'm looking at it from my perspective, I think it would be in the best interest of the industry, and it would probably be in the best interest of the pig. I'm not sure yet whether it's in the best interest of the pig producer. Just because of all the issues that we have with the social dynamics that come into play. I think in order to do this, we need to have a groundswell movement of producers who are interested in sharing information and passing that on, so that that might be the capability.
Montse, you can comment?
No, go ahead.
Okay. From our perspective, there's a lot of diseases that are already reportable but are non-actionable. And that, a lot of it may be the distinction of that. If you look at a lot of the state animal health boards or the agricultural boards, there is already the authority to go that route. And a lot of that is up to the state veterinarian, or at least the state agricultural commissioner. So the ability to make a disease reportable is already there and present. Now, some states you have to have that go through legislature, but really where it comes to play is looking at, is a disease going to be actionable or not? So, for example, if we look back to 2009 when influenza, the H1N1 issue surfaced, the influenza for swine was not a reportable disease, but yet we had actions inflicted upon the industry because of that. It subsequently became reportable for human health, but not for swine. So there were some delicacies there. Traditionally, we've looked at reportable diseases as being pseudorabies, brucellosis, which you have to mandatorily report that they're there, identify those farms, and then there's subsequent government action, whether it be quarantine, herd elimination, and also subsequent payments to be able to, if you have to have a herd depopped. When we start the discussion for these emerging diseases, they don't always fit into that nice black and white situation. So if you look at PRRS, if you look at PED, you could still report them and identify, where herds are, have people share information, but then what actions would be taken. And I know there's a lot of discussion currently about that very thing, and how do we balance the need to be able to understand where diseases are at versus what actions do we need to have happen associated with those. Because, for example, if PED was declared a reportable and actionable disease in May, there was the potential that herds would be quarantined, movements would be shut down, and a lot of other things associated with that. So it's a lot of things to consider, and I know there is a lot of discussion going on within Pork Board, within National Pork Producers Council, and with USDA to really assess what that all would entail and look like. So it's, that is in discussion, and that is being, looked at.
My comment, I want just to add a comment in the context of reportable disease for PRRS, in the context of the regional programs, right? So we've been working, let's say, if we use the North 212 project, it's been in place for since 2004, so almost 10 years. Yeah. And it feels like we go two steps forward, one backward. So for how long producers will want to be in that situation? So if we look at what happened in PRV in the 80s or 90s, eventually the disease had to become reportable to give it that last push. And perhaps in the case of PRRS, we will see that, or that's one way to, once we have all the tools lined up, one way to consider. I mean, if we want to be serious about really getting rid of the virus. Alternatively, we will just say, no, we just want to live with it, but we see that the cost is just way too high for that.
So the long summary, what I hear is that initiative really needs to come from you as producers. You need to push forward to the state, local, federal authorities, either governmental or your leadership bodies, if you think it's important that these classification and these viruses or these diseases that are either here or are going to enter the country or may enter the country on that classification issue, and whether or not an initiative needs to be put forward to eliminate those viruses. So it really needs to come from the industry itself.
I think just a quick observation. The fellow who made the comment about being concerned about being told what to do by the packing plants is the big crux of the issue here for so many things, because no one really likes to be told what to do. And in a voluntary program, we are inviting people to share. We want the behavior to be used appropriately. And once you get this taint of government involvement, then people all of a sudden start getting worried that that's going to be, they're going to be told. However, it does provide an organizational system so that perhaps we can make some other progress. But I think the point is well taken.
Question.
Has any work been done testing the ability of PED virions to attach themselves to dust particles as a form of transmission and aerosolization?
Everybody hear the question? It's an aerosol transmission question on how it moves on potentially in dust particles.
Actually, I will say that I know of that study because we've collected samples for that, but it just happened during right before Christmas, and the samples need to be tested. I don't know whether you are aware of any other study, but we completed a study in which we look at different biosecurity and included PED, in which we collected air samples within facilities experimentally infected with PED, and we collected the air and the dust with different sizes. So we want to see whether it's found in the dust, in the air, and then to which sizes it's associated with.
I have one other question. There are a number of producers here that get their piglets from Canada and they get shipped ultimately down packing plants here in the States. Is there any work across the border with the Canadians involved in this PED?
Yes, actually there is. Currently, Canada does not have PED in their country. They have not had any cases or had it diagnosed currently. And in fact, I think on the 16th, Ontario is having a conference call basically on all the different things that they are doing. I work very closely with the Canadian Swine Health Board, or in communication with those folks, and they're very aggressive on returning trailers, on having almost more of a mandatory wash and disinfect before the trailers even come back and return to Canada. So their efforts really right now are focused on exclusion, trying to keep it out and trying to at least make sure everything coming back into the country is cleaned and disinfected that's been to the United States. But there is ongoing discussion and conversation, and they're very worried about the virus too. And so I know a lot of their researchers and diagnosticians have also been discussing this with people in the States as far as, how best to diagnose, et cetera. So there is a lot of conversation.
Time for a couple more questions. Right in front here.
Have you done any work at all on the incidence of re-break and grow finish, say a nursery or a finisher that has had the virus, the PED, and then what recommendations for cleanup do you have for those, non-South Farm sites?
Is that question heard in the back? Okay, all right.
As far as looking at the incidence of re-break, we have not gone back to focus on that, and that comes down to some of the reporting as far as the diagnostic cases. So I don't have that information. I don't know if anyone else has heard of that.
I think the question is the basic steps to clean up a site.
That part we do.
I'm assuming being depopulated and now you're going to bring new pigs in. Was that the question?
Yes, there are, in that list of fact sheets, there is one that states if you have a positive diagnosis in a nursery or grow finish site, it does list recommendations kind of point by point of what you should do to go through and eliminate that virus. So that we do have that information available.
So, but if it lives in the manure for 28 days or whatever, you don't have 28 days till you refill.
Right, and some of that is going to be, considering whether it's a deep pit barn or whether it's a shallow flush barn type, those type things, that will have to be taken in consideration. As far as the document doesn't address each of those nuances, just we don't have enough paper. But you're right, those are a lot of things that you'd have to take into consideration with your site on what type of flush system it is. The ones that we used to have were shallow flush, and you kind of get stuck on those because you have to move the manure at some point in time or one way or the other. So you hope at least that it may be broke early on in the cycle, and when you get the next group of pigs, it's not. But I think the big thing is if it is shallow flush pits, to make sure that those are cleaned and removed of manure, if there's any feed spilled, but to try to get that as away from the pig area as much as possible. And it may not always be possible, but at least it's one of the things that we used to do.
The other point is on recycled water. I mean, most of the systems here in Minnesota don't use it, but many systems use recycled water in some areas, so try to avoid that as well.
Paul?
Yeah, Gordy, I was just going to make a comment. We've had a number of clients that have reloaded positive sites. They were positive last summer and been able to reload those, and the pigs have been able to stay negative. That was cleanup in the summer, and it's certainly dependent upon how good a job of cleanup you do. And so if you do a good job of cleanup and disinfecting and cleaning up the chute and the area around the chute, all those things, you can get rid of the virus from that facility or site. The challenge is when it's frozen and snow and the weather we've got right now.
So I think the point is do a normal site cleanup. The 28 days that was stated is under the laboratory conditions. So as Paul stating, under field conditions, it may not survive that long, at least in the summertime. And so there is hope that you can take a site that was positive, get it back negative again. Question? I think we've got time for maybe one or two more. Go ahead.
Just one more question on the packing plant. Will they ever buy into the fact that they have to take the pigs in the back of the truck so store drivers don't have to go into the pens? And as far as going to the office, everybody has cell phones, so there's no reason to go to the office.
Right. I think it's just stuff that we're continuing to work with them on. I'd love to think in the grand scheme of things that we can get these things changed. I think it's just time and persistence to keep working with folks on getting that changed, because it is a mindset, and those always take a lot longer to change. So, it's not just us at Pork Board, but we've been working with our counterparts at NPPC, working with our Packer committees to try to get this information out and get that point across. So, I'd love to say, yeah, we can change it tomorrow, but it's going to be an ongoing hammering event, let me put it that way.
Time for one more question from the audience. I have one for Lisa, I think, or for anyone on our panel. We haven't talked much about vaccines. What is the National Pork Board's role? And I know you're going through a strategic process right now, and how are involved is that process in vaccines for any one of these three viruses?
Sure. As our committee and even our board evaluate the development of vaccines, a lot of what the philosophy is more of having available seed monies to get that process going and to get it started, because obviously we don't have enough money in our budget to really truly be able to start a vaccine and take it through to fruition, whether that means, all the way from development to field trials to safety, et cetera. So where we've been focusing our money is trying to identify the priority of need. Obviously PED, for example, we have a need for vaccine because there isn't one existing currently that's commercially available. There are vaccines in the works. So the committee has agreed that we whether it's influenza, PRRS, PED, to look at having monies available to provide the development for seed money. So to start a new technology or to assess, does this even work? Because there's a lot of concepts we evaluate that go bust, they don't work. But if we don't try them, we don't know. So that's really where in strategic planning and the focus is more to let's start some of these technologies for these key diseases, but not necessarily do the whole process from start to finish.
Thank you, Lisa. Would you join me in thanking our presenters today?